Okay, so we just learned about like fractions, so now we want to talk about unlike fractions. These are the ones whose denominators are different. If you remember up here, the denominators were the same. So unlike fractions have different denominators. So it kind of works a little bit different. The first thing we have to do is we have to rename the fractions with the least common denominator. And if you remember on Friday, I showed you guys a video. I'll put it in this folder too to remind you how to find the least common denominator. Once we find the least common denominator, we'll rename those fractions, which means we'll put them in the form with the least common denominator. Now we'll have like fractions. So then we can just add the numerators and keep the denominators the same. And then, of course, the last thing we'll need to do is simplify. So an example of this might be something like 2/10 plus 3/5. I have different denominators. So I go and find my least common denominator. So I write out my multiples of 5 and 10. So I have 10 times 1 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20, 10 times 3 is 30, and 10 times 4 is 40. Remember I told you we go to about the 4 and stop and see if I can find anything. Then 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, and 5 times 4 is 20. Now we want the smallest they have in common. So the smallest that they have is 10. So I rename my fractions. That means I'm going to put them both with the denominator of 10. Now this one already has a denominator of 10, so it can stay the same. But in order to get to 10 from 5, I have to do times 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. So now that we have our numerators and our denominators, and these are the same, I follow the next step, which just says to add the numerators. So 2 plus 6 is 8, and we keep the denominator 10. And of course, my last step says to simplify. So if I have 8 over 10, I want to find what are both of these divisible by in order to simplify it. Both of these are divisible by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So this would be my final answer. Again, this works for subtraction, and you also need to watch out for the positives and negatives that's going to go on. That's how they're going to throw you off. Now you can do your 5 questions of your classwork, and good luck.